Today we have Lowell Feld with Blue Virginia with us today. Welcome to the show, Lowell.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So today we're talking about big and little lies. And for me, this is really a significant conversation because as we all know, we'll start off with little white lies, as we call them in our culture, or misinformation, which we are calling these recently. And then we become accustomed to them. And then those little lies become bigger lies. So I'd love for you to start off just talking about, particularly in the media, what are some both big and little lies we've seen recently?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen these for years, not just recently, but there are a number of very consistent, I would say, you could call them lies. I mean, there's something that the media does, particularly the political media does, that is very misleading, and I think it does a disservice to readers. For example, they do something called false equivalency, where you have one side, which is, let's just say, climate scientists, which is obviously true. And another side is climate science denial, okay? And they make that somehow like an equivalent between those two, or one party, one political party in America, let's just hypothetically here, right? The Democratic Party, in this case, supports democracy and voting rights. And another political party, the Republican Party, does not. In fact, it strongly opposes democracy and voting rights from what we've seen. So somehow there's an equivalence between those two things, like one party that's fighting for voting rights and one party that's fighting against, or Joe Biden and the Democrats want to get things done and Republicans are trying to obstruct. Well, that's not equivalent. I mean, but you read that all the time in things like Politico, and the New York Times just had an article that was just pilloried on Twitter because it was a classic of all this. So they do this all the time. So I would say that's a lie because it's not actually true that there's an equivalence between these sides. And this relates to, it's a variant of sort of both sidesism, which is what is called, where you have, the media feels this need to always be neutral and unbiased. So they have to have, if they have one side of something, they have to have another like equivalent side of that, even if there isn't. And there usually isn't an equivalent side of that in a lot of these issues on whether it's like, okay, so if you have like racial justice on one side and then when you have white supremacists on the other side, I mean, do you really want to have both sides in that case? Or again, the voter suppression versus support for democracy, whatever. They also do, the media loves horse race coverage instead of substantive coverage of issues, you know, so who's up and who's down. Like, so if Joe Biden is trying to get a major infrastructure package or democracy protection package through, what's more important, that Joe Biden is up or down politically, or that this is going to affect like our entire country, hundreds of millions of people? But they do that. So I don't know if that's a lie, but it's a way of presenting information that I would say does a disservice to readers and to the American democracy and public. They also love things like, they love the narrative for some reason. I think it plays into their being neutral and not being biased towards liberals, because they were accused for so many years of being the liberal media. The Democrats in disarray narrative, they love that one, where no matter what, the Democrats, even if they're very much in array, we'll say, the media likes to portray Democrats as a mess, falling apart, like, you know, at war with themselves, civil war with the far left coming after incumbents. And this gets to, you know, the other day there was an article in the Washington Post which basically claimed that 1/5 of House Democratic incumbents in Virginia were being primaried from the left. And it was a push from the left, actually. They used the word push. So I was like, okay, that doesn't sound right to me. So I just looked at, I went to the websites of the challengers. I went to the websites of the incumbents, and I was able to find 4 out of 55. There were 55 Democrats in the House of Delegates. I found 4 that were clearly, I think you could argue clearly were primaries from the left. Okay, fine. But that's it. I didn't find even anything close to 11. So why do they feel this need to create these narratives that Democrats are, you know, being, the Democratic incumbents are being primaried from the left, when it's not even true? It's like they create the narrative first and then go back and take the facts or whatever and shoehorn them in there to fit their narrative.
So, what recommendations do you have for a lot of us as activists who, when we find this, when we see this, just like you did a great job of outlining in that
Thank
article
you.
you wrote, what do we do when we see this?
I mean, I think, well, first of all, I think it's really important to be an informed consumer of media. And I think a lot of people just kind of consume media passively. I
Yes.
think you need to be an active consumer of media. You need to know who is writing this and what their biases are, if you can possibly know that. Hopefully you can. I mean, if you follow it and you pay attention, you should be able to. And then you need to take this information, process it with that in mind. And then you need to do your own research, frankly. You need to use Google, and you can go to VPEP, which is a very good resource here in Virginia, vpep.org, I think it is, which has tons of information on all the districts, House and Senate districts in Virginia, the partisan leans of those districts, who's running, so you can also call it out, like I did it. I mean, I'm just a activist, basically, really, when it comes down to it. I'm just a citizen. Anyone can do that. You can call it out on Facebook, Twitter. You can go in the comments section of the Washington Post or whatever and call it out and say, what are you guys doing? And or join in with other people who are calling it out. That's what I would say. I mean, at least for starters.
And then do you have any, so many of us are creators of media these days. It's definitely a lot easier than it has been in the past. Do you have any additional recommendations for those of us who are creating media not to fall into those traps?
I mean, the fact that, there was a Washington Post, an op-ed the other day by Professor Mark Brazil from GMU, and he was claiming that Democrats were lurching to the left in Virginia, and that we're risking our House majority in November because we've gone too far in the progressive direction. So I looked at issue after issue. Okay, so what are these issues that are so far left, this progressive agenda, right? So ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment is actually, it turns out, it's good policy, and it's really popular. It's like extremely popular. How about promoting clean energy or something like that, or environmental protection? Again, super popular, like 70, 80, 90% support solar and wind. How about a lot of the criminal justice reform and police reform? I looked at like 3 or 4 recent polls by the Watson Center and a bunch of others, Roanoke College, whatever. And they all show strong support. Background checks for gun purchases, very, very popular. It's really LGBTQ equality, protection, of LGBTQ people, very, very popular. Women's reproductive freedom. So you just go down the list, and it's like, so okay. So basically, they all either have strong majority support, or at least plurality support. So by definition, that's not left. That's center. Like, if you're in the majority, by definition, that's the center. So I don't know why but that's they love doing this, that there's some sort of that the Democrats have gone way far left. We overreached our mandate that we were given by voters, which I think the voters approve, since the polls show they overwhelmingly approve. But okay, so but they love doing this. They also, I mean, there's so little lies in that article. They get things wrong all the time, like in constructing their narrative. They claim that at the turn of the 21st century, Virginia was fire engine red, and now it's azure blue. Well, neither one of those is true, actually. At the beginning of the 21st century, we had, let's see, Senator Chuck Robb, who is a Democrat. We elected Governor Mark Warner and Lieutenant Governor Tim Kaine in 2001. The legislature was about evenly divided in 2000. It doesn't sound like South Dakota or North Dakota or Idaho or whatever. And then in 2005, we elected Tim Kaine governor. Then in 2006, we elected Jim Webb. I mean, so I don't even know what that means. And I don't think we're azure blue now either, frankly. I think we could go purple again. We could lose seats in the House of Delegates. We could. I mean, it's depends on turnout. Virginia's a blue state if everyone turns out. Like, if huge numbers of people turn out, we vote blue. If they don't, if Democrats stay home, look at 2009 was the last disaster, when the year after Obama was elected, Democrats, whatever, went to sleep, I guess, and Republicans were pissed. They had the Tea Party and all. And they turned out in droves, and we didn't. And Creed Deeds lost by like 17 points for governor. I don't think that's going to happen like this year, but So anyway, this is going a little off from the media thing, but Yeah.
Thank you, Lowell. I think you gave us some really good food for thought in terms of identifying false equivalencies, making sure we do our
Right.
research when we read resources like VPAP, all very, very important. So thank you so much for joining us. So how can,
Absolutely.
for the very few people out there that don't know about Blue Virginia, how can you find Blue Virginia?
You just go on to bluevirginia.us. We have a Twitter, if you're on Twitter, and Facebook as well, Blue Virginia on both. And yeah, you can follow that, and you can subscribe to our weekly email list too if you want to do that. That's on Blue Virginia. You'll see on the right side. You can click on that. So yeah, appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you, Lowell.